Today we have writer, singer, and mindful movement educator Terra Skye Livingston joining us. Thank you so much for taking the time to discuss the influence of art and community in your life. I'm so happy to have you here. So let's kick off with some questions, shall we? What
Let's do
art
it.
form did you first fall in love with?
Yeah, definitely singing. I think I came out of the womb singing. Um,
Okay.
I remember like when I was little, I would just be singing at the top of my lungs. There were so many times where my mom was like, "Shut up," because it would be like the middle of the night, and I'd just be like, "La, la, la,"
It's
you know,
time to serenade you all.
right? I'm like,
That
"What do
sounds
you mean? You're
lovely.
mad? You should be grateful."
Do you
Yeah,
not
so,
hear this divine voice? Now,
right.
that's amazing. So you've always had an artistic inclination then, you would say?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely always been, just I think I was really blessed to just be born with a creative mind and just a love for art and song and all of that. Yeah,
That's amazing. And
definitely.
the will to embrace it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
How did you find your way into the arts you do now? Obviously, you recently did the 100 Days of Singing on Instagram, singing you've grown up doing. You're now more into writing and you do some content creation. How did you find your way into those avenues?
So I remember when I was like, I don't know, maybe in first or second grade, and we had a Scholastics book fair. I don't know if you guys had
Oh
that.
my gosh, we had them in Australia.
Nice.
Love. I was so
Yeah.
sad when I went to high school. They like came for a day to be like, "What questions do you have about high school? Like, what play equipment do you have, and how often is the Scholastic Book Fair?" They don't have play equipment, and they stopped the book fair.
Rude.
Why get old?
Rude. So rude.
So rude.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the highlights of the year every year for sure. And I
Yeah.
don't think we had it in high school either, but yeah, definitely in elementary and growing up. I just remember, in first grade, it was like maybe one of my first purchases where it was this journal, and it had a little lock on it that I
Yeah.
bought, and just started journaling and writing stories and I think I grew up with a love of reading. I'm thankful to my mom who always read and always had books, on hand for us to explore. And yeah, so that kind of love of reading turned into this love of creating stories. And so, yeah, I just write them all out. And most of them are pretty much garbage, but, they're for me. So it doesn't
Oh,
matter. It
sounds
doesn't
like a
matter at all.
typical overcritical creative. The things that you
Yeah,
have written and
yeah.
I have read have been amazing.
Thank you.
Would you say that you get different types of satisfaction from the different art forms, like singing versus writing?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like singing is kind of like a form of meditation.
That's
I mean, and
interesting.
I think it kind of literally is, you have to control your breath and you're
Mm.
creating these sounds and whether or not it sounds good to someone else, internally, it is kind of this form of breath work in a way. And so in singing, I feel more meditative. And then in writing, it's kind of more like a huge like boost of the happy chemicals in my brain where it's just like the time flies by
Yeah.
and I can be writing something for hours and hours and then like the sun goes down and I'm like, wait, when did it get dark? What's going on right now?
Yeah, just in the zone.
Right, yeah, so it's more of like an energetic I guess an energetic flow state with writing as opposed to singing, which is more um I don't know, like more of like an introspective kind of thing, which sounds weird because singing feels performative. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I think for me, it's definitely more of like an internal meditative thing.
A
Yeah,
different source of mindfulness, maybe.
definitely. Definitely
Yeah,
that.
I love that, I love that. Do you have any particular habits that help you get into the creative mode, or is it just, like, always on?
It's definitely not always on. No, I do have, my morning routine consists of a meditation and I always think of three ideas and I'll write a paragraph about whichever one I feel is the best idea. And that's
I love
just
that.
yeah, it's, for myself to kind of um, get into that zone, get into that space. And, probably 99% of those ideas will never turn into anything or be anything major. But yeah, it's just a way to kind of get the juices flowing. So yeah, the morning routine is super important to me. And then I also microdose, right? So
Mhm.
that's a huge habit of mine. And I know the legality of that is a little bit iffy.
Depends
But
where you are.
it does, yeah. So, I mean, I know here in California, they're talking about legalizing. So that's an
Mhm.
incredible thing. Microdosing psilocybin has literally shifted my perspective, my reality, and has brought me so much more creative energy. So that's a huge habit that I am really consistent with, for sure.
Mhm. For those that aren't familiar with microdosing, the idea is that you take a quantity that is so low it doesn't you don't feel it per se. It's not like what people would normally
Exactly.
do with taking magic mushrooms. But you
Yeah.
have found it's like affected your mood even still.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, and it is one of those things that kind of like, I think it grows over time, like it builds up in your
Mm.
system over time. And yeah, so I take 100 milligrams every third day. And so it's a tiny, tiny dosage. And you don't feel like high or anything like that.
Mm.
But yeah, over time, um, I don't know, it just completely shifts. I've battled depression and all kinds of things throughout my life. And it's just one of those things that it's better than any pharmaceutical that I've ever been on. It boosts creativity. It helps out with those depressive kind of episodes and that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, it's magic for sure.
Yeah, that's great that you've really found something that helps you, uh, yeah, feel better, enjoy
Yeah,
life. That's wonderful. And I like the starting the day with a morning practice. Sometimes I
hmm,
will do something similar. It's not to be creative, but list 3 things to be grateful for
love that.
before you go into the day, just to set the mind in the right direction, like set the tone for the day, if you will. I
Totally,
think it's good to have morning habits other than
definitely.
chugging coffee, which I still fully support. Love coffee.
It's an important part of the morning routine
Very
for sure.
important, very important.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Totally. So what is your creative process like? Do you follow a formula when you're writing or just let it flow?
I've played around with a lot of different methods. And I think the one that works best for me is that when I get an idea for a story, I'll write it all out and just kind of let it flow. And I don't kind of bother myself with the details or, any research that I have to do, or I'll just kind of write the story. And then I go back and I'll kind of fill in the gaps where I needed to do some research. So I'll do the research and fill in those places. Um, and then I kind of like work through the edits. So
Yeah.
I'm a planner by nature. So it's kind of a challenge for me. With the first few stories that I wrote that I wanted to actually turn into something, I had a hard time with that, and it would take me like a really long time to get it all out. And
Mhm.
then I would lose motivation like midway through because I'd be kind of overwhelmed by, oh my gosh, there's so many things I don't know. And like, I really need to um, perfect all of this information before I put it on paper. But kind of flipping that and going just writing the story and then doing the research later has really helped me to push through the whole thing. And then the
Mm.
research part is fun for me. I love all of that. So it's easy to go back in and fill in those gaps. So that's kind of the process that I've been in for the last couple of years. And that's really, really worked well for me.
Yeah, I think that that's a very effective way of going about it. I don't write like you do, but for sometimes I'll have to write like sales pitches for work or something. And
Okay.
if I don't just sit down and write everything out and then go back and do the edits, I'll be on the first sentence trying to find the perfect synonym for the word that
Yep.
I'm looking for an
Yep.
hour.
Yep.
Yeah,
And you're like, this
just
is
gotta
never going to be finished. Yeah.
literally,
Yep.
literally.
Totally.
So where do you draw your inspiration from?
Oh my gosh. So many things, but I think mostly from nature and the earth. I spend a lot of time outdoors. And, especially with the book that I'm writing right now, it is primarily in an outside winter-like space. And so, I moved from LA to Big Bear, which is a mountain with lots of snow. And part of that decision was because I was like, I need some more inspiration for this book. I need to be in a cold weather climate so that I can really kind of draw from that, But yeah, personal experiences in nature and in the forests and the mountains and the water and all of that, as well as just like experiencing people. A lot of my characters come from people who I know, or like they're like an amalgamation of a bunch of people that I've met, and all of that. So yeah, nature, people.
Yeah, nature's a good source of everything. It's a great place as well to just go reset. Yeah, beautiful. What drives you to keep creating? Is there something that makes you want to do, or it's just who you are?
I think it really is just who I am. It's kind of this like insatiable hunger almost for creation. And it's sometimes I am in that mode of like consumption where I just need to like lower my output and just be in that consumption mode. But really it's just I feel almost empty on the days where I'm not creating something or activating that part of my brain. So I really think that it just is, I just am like that.
Yeah,
So
yeah. There's scientific studies that are done on the creative arts quite often, and they show that it has impacts on the brain, your wave patterns, emotions, the nervous system, and can raise your serotonin levels as well. So, I mean, it feels good because it's literally changing the way your brain works and making you happy, which
yeah,
I think is very interesting.
that is no surprise to me at all. At all. Even on those days where I'm like writing, and I'm like sitting in the same position for a while and I can feel my shoulders shrugging up and I'm like, tense, I still end up, leaving that writing session or whatever, just feeling just joyful, and yeah, I totally believe that. That is no surprise at all, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So what is your favorite thing you've created? I know that's a hard question because so many creatives are like, I don't like any of it, but do you have something that stands out to you that you like?
You know, um, it might be because it's the most recent thing that I've done, but the screenplay that I wrote, it's for a short animated film. It's about 30 minutes long. It's probably my most favorite thing right now, at least, that I've
Mhm.
created. And I think it's because it came out of a dream that I had, and I just worked really hard to try to figure out how to get it all on paper. And it was also the first time I'd ever tried to write a screenplay. So there was a lot of this internal struggle with these perfectionistic tendencies that I sometimes have. And I ended up just writing it all out, formatting it, and just felt really proud of it. It's definitely, I love the story. And I'm just really proud that I was able to kind of just put it out there. And whether it's perfect or not doesn't actually matter because it's the story that needed to come out of me.
Yeah,
And I really love it. So,
I love
yeah.
that. Is that something that is being produced or you're just circulating it at the moment?
We'll see. I've entered it into a couple of screenwriting competitions. I would love to have it produced eventually, but the way that it needs to be done is in this form of animation called rotoscope, which is a kind of expensive undertaking. And so,
I'm not
um,
familiar with it. What does that involve?
so it's basically, and my understanding of it is really limited. I just like how it looks, but
Okay.
my understanding of it is that it's um, basically the animation is done and then there will be animators that are drawing on it live as it's kind of rolling, and so that creates the
Mm.
movement of it. And so that's just a really basic view of it, or I don't really know many of the technicalities, but there's a couple of works that have been done that way that I have just found to be the most beautiful, forms of media. And there's a show right now on Amazon Prime called Undone, which is done in Rotoscope Animation. And then there's also one that was about lucid dreaming, and the name of it's escaping me right now, but it was a movie that came out like maybe a decade ago. Waking Life. It's called Waking Life. And that was done in that form as well. And I think the thing that they both have in common is that the people behind the project wanted it to almost look like you were in this dreamlike state. And it does that so well. And so this screenplay that I wrote is kind of that, going back to it starting in a dream in my own head, and then just the kind of thematic elements of it are very dreamlike as well. And so it needs to be done that way. So
yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look those ones up. Because I don't think I've seen that forum before.
Oh yeah, it's
you have
so
certainly piqued
beautiful.
my interest. I would say my personal favorites of yours, in terms of content creation, you have an inverted practice, which involves a lot of handstands. So fun. I will put a link to it in the show notes for anyone who wants to give it a go, because I highly recommend. I guess it's movement meditation / a bit of yoga. Great workout, but yeah, very joyful. It's a very, very playful movement.
Yeah, I started yoga like 12 years ago. I started my practice, and then I guess it was around 7 or 8 years ago that I did my first yoga teacher training. And then as I kind of progressed through that world, I did a lot more functional mobility training and a lot more mindfulness based practice trainings. And so I just kind of, formed this practice that kind of joined all of those worlds together. And yeah, the inversions one is definitely one of my favorite. It's definitely one of the more fun practices that is rooted in mindfulness, but also like, how can we explore this new perspective? Like, how can we go upside down and explore what that feels like? So yeah, that's also one of my favorites for sure.
Yeah. It's a good one. So what would you say your favorite experience is as an audience member? Do you have an artistic moment that stands out to you?
I have so many. Oh my gosh. And I have such a hard time with favorites because I just do, like it's so hard to pick one.
We don't have to pick number one. Maybe just one that happens to be coming to mind right now.
Okay, sure. Okay, so there's this piece. It's a painting, or well, I guess it's mixed media. It's done by this artist named Jaune Quick to See Smith. She's a Native American artist, and she has this piece called State Names. And it is just so profound. It's equally like heart-wrenching and beautiful all at once. Basically, she, put a map of the U.S. as we know it today, and there's like this dripping kind of like drippings from, the top to the bottom. It looks like it's been rained on or something. And all of the state names that do not come from indigenous roots are like washed away. And so the only names that are left are those who have origins in these Native American words. And that one is just such a powerful piece to me. I can just look at it for hours and kind of see different things in it each time, and just really appreciate, the land that we're on. And I think it just speaks so much it's just a map, really. But the way that she created it is just so, it's incredible. It's truly incredible.
That's amazing. I think the true test of a piece of art is, does it make you feel something? And can you keep going back to it and keep feeling things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Definitely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
so for those that are interested in getting involved in some of the creative arts you partake in, like singing or writing, how would you recommend they go about it?
Just do it, like it's like a Nike commercial. It's just
go.
You just start, like especially with singing. I am a firm believer that everyone can sing. Okay.
Yeah.
It's this animalistic, primal thing that we are all able to do. And even if you're just like, driving around in your car and singing to the radio, you feel that, connection to, or I feel that connection to everything that came before me, everything that will come after me. It is something that links us all together so profoundly. And it doesn't have to sound good. I think a lot of people are afraid of singing because they're like, oh, it'll be embarrassing and it won't sound good and people will make fun of me, or whatever the case is. It does not matter. It just literally doesn't. Just sing, let that sound come out of you. And it will be beautiful in its own right. And I think it's the same for writing. It's not as primal as singing, but just start, just like with singing, it does not have to be good. If you want to write, then write. And read. Reading is the most important thing for writing, I think. That's like the foundation, right? Read as much as you possibly can read, and then let your imagination kind of take over,
Yeah. I think singing and writing are great art forms for people to get into because the barrier of entry is so low, particularly if you're just wanting to do it as a hobby. You don't have professional aspirations. This is just, I want to feel good. I want to do something artistic to feel those feelings. You pick up a pen and you start writing. You open your mouth and you start singing. It is as simple as that.
You don't need an instrument. You don't need any kind of fancy technology or equipment. Yeah, totally.
You just go.
Yeah, definitely. 100%. And I mean, with writing, I think if someone was wanting to kind of, maybe they have a love of writing, but they want to take it to the next level, or they have a hard time coming up with stories, I would say one thing that really, really helped me when I wanted to take it up a notch was I would read, the bulk of a story that I liked, and then I would finish the ending, so it's like,
oh, interesting.
You just, without knowing what it is. Or you can, if you're like more of a TV person, watch half of a TV episode and then write down what you think the ending would look like, or even the middle portion. That's something that has really, really helped me in my creative process, for sure.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that method before. That's really interesting.
It's a good one. I love it.
Yeah. So you have lived all over Texas, Toronto, LA. You're about to jet off to Alaska.
I am.
How do you develop personal community as someone who is moving around a lot?
I am so thankful that I live in a time where we have technology that exists. I think, that's an incredible way to keep those connections alive. Like, I haven't seen you in person in over a year, or maybe around a year. Yet we still have this really great connection and, games nights and all that stuff. And I think that's a huge part of it. But I also try my best to live in a kind of moment to moment mentality. And so community can be everyone. I think Walt Whitman is one of my favorite poets. And in a lot of his poetry, he talks about this connection that we all have, this oneness, of humanity. And one of my favorite poems by him is Crossing the Brooklyn, what is it? Crossing Brooklyn Ferry or something like that. I'll have to look it up. But essentially in the poem, he's talking about how everything that he's seeing connects him to everyone who has seen it before and everyone who will see it after him, just by simply looking at this place. And so I think it's a really incredible thing to remember, that we are connected whether we are in direct relation with someone or not. Like, we just are. It is whether we try for it or not. And so that kind of mentality, I think, even if I'm alone in a forest, I know that I'm connected to everyone else who's been there before me and who will be there after me. And so that's kind of community for me.
Yeah, it's a nice mindset. As art, I mentioned before, scientific studies, all the health benefits that come with practicing that social connection also has a lot of health benefits. Having a strong social circle can lower anxiety and depression, help us regulate emotion, lead to higher self-esteem and empathy, and it can even improve your immune system, which is, I mean, given the day and age we're living in, a nice bonus.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I do think that, as you were saying, the access to the internet makes things so much easier to keep connected with people, because we can just jump on a call like this, see each other face to face. Obviously, it would be lovely to be in the same room, but this is something that we couldn't do 15 years ago. Like, you had to know
For sure.
someone's landline and hope that they were home. Maybe 20
Right?
years. I'm showing my age there. Yeah,
You're
while
like
we were
attached to a
growing up.
cord.
Yeah, literally, literally. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
for all the bad things that come with the internet, also a lot of very, very wonderful things it has
Yeah,
facilitated
and I
also.
mean, like with my mindfulness teachings and stuff, during the height of the pandemic, it was like there was no in studio classes anymore. And there is a certain energy that I think is missed when you're communicating online. Like you can't really feel
Yeah.
as deeply the presence of others and that energetic connection. But it is, I mean, it's wonderful that we live in this time where, regardless of what's going on, I mean, think of pandemics past where you're just locked in your room and you can't like see anybody or anything like
Really.
that. So being able to connect through platforms like this, it's I just have endless gratitude for the time in which we're living, for sure.
Yeah, really. Little bit of a topic switch. I would say that you're an activist and you stand up for what you believe in. What causes do you feel strongly about at the moment?
Yeah, definitely one that I'm right now and have been for a while is the Land Back Initiative. I think it's super important that we recognize that, especially here on this land that we're on right now, through colonization, it has been depleted of resources. There's people living without clean water in one of the richest nations on earth. We have kind of entered into this space where we need to take a look at shifting our focus and returning the land back to its original people. Because, mostly before pre-colonization, this country, the US, was kind of a utopia. It was lush and beautiful, and there were many cultures, but they all cared deeply about the land, the animals, the water. And it's like a deep rooted spirituality almost of these native people. Um, and so returning the land back to these people and putting those values back in place could actually save the very land that we're living on. So I think that's probably one of the most important things going on right now. And then, of course, the Black Lives Matter movement is one that I've been involved with since 2014. And it is definitely, we have to start to recognize that reparations need to be paid. And we need to kind of face this very serious structural shift that needs to happen.
Yep.
And I think that those two causes are really closely linked together in so many ways. But, giving the land back to the indigenous people and going and living based on those values kind of goes hand in hand with treating all lives as valuable,
Yeah.
and that starts with recognizing that in this country, we do not treat Black lives as if they are valuable on a systemic level. And so those are the two causes that I think are really most important to me right now, for sure.
For people that are interested in learning more or getting involved in supporting those causes, do you have any recommendations as to how they could do that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so for the Black Lives Matter movement specifically, there's a ton of stuff on social media, and you could literally just search that hashtag and probably find a million different things. One of my favorite resources is it's a newsletter. It's a daily newsletter that comes out by an organization called Anti-Racism Daily, or ARD. And it's just so much learning. And I think that really at the base of social change has to be education. We have to learn about the history of what's going on, because it's really easy to be like, oh, that's not an issue if you don't understand, all of the details of something. If
Mm-hmm.
you're not
Yeah.
seeing it in your personal life, it's really hard to recognize it as something that needs to see change.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely ARD, I would totally recommend. And then for the land back initiatives, I think knowing whose land you're on and getting involved with that specific community is incredibly important. And so there's a website called whose land dot, I think it's org. Maybe we can figure out if it's .org or .com, but I think it's
I'll
.org.
check. Yeah.
And that is a really great first step to learn whose land you're on. And then once you find that out, you can research, what's going on with that group specifically, and how you can get involved and how you can help in your local community.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I'll also put links to those in the show notes. So for those people who want to keep up to date with what you're doing, how can they find you?
So right now, just through Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
I am with Skye, and that's Skye. And so I am is standing for intuitive movement. I'm doing a whole kind of shift in my website right now. I've taken it down so that I can kind of rebuild it and rework it in a way. And then I have also taken my portfolio down for now for my writing, so I can kind of do the same thing. I'm in this sort of transitional space right now, and just kind of, I hate the phrase rebranding, but that's kind of really what it is.
It is
So,
what it is.
yeah. So for right now, it's just on Instagram, and then as soon as I have that up, it'll be the link in my bio there, whatever
That's
that ends up
great.
being.
That's great. If it's okay, I'll put a link to your profile in the notes. And then, yeah, if people follow you there, then they'll be able to keep up to date when your new website comes online. Anything new and exciting you decide to do.
Awesome.
Wonderful. This has been an absolute delight. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat about your artistic endeavors and your passions within the community. Yeah, it's been wonderful.
It has been wonderful, and I'm so freaking honored. I mean, I know I said this to you in text when you offered this to me, but like my imposter syndrome just went like, what? But yeah, I'm super honored, and this has been such a cool conversation, and your questions are amazing. So thank you so much
Thank you.